We're live. Bob Conley here. Come on in. This video is about your innate leadership sense and also answering the eternal question, are leaders born or made? So in this video, I'll tell you what I consider to be the two critical elements that define a leader and lay the groundwork for the following 4 videos in which I'll focus on each video. I'll focus on one of the 4 innate leadership senses. And this matters because leaders and aspiring leaders need to know what can and can't be fixed in order for them to succeed individually and for their organizations to succeed. So first, a little housekeeping. If you haven't, please hit subscribe. That way you'll be informed on when there are new videos. If you feel like you've benefited from the video, please hit like. And also, if you're watching live or when watching later on, please feel free to ask questions or leave comments in the comment section. All right, what is a leader? So effective leaders possess 2 critical characteristics. They know what should be done, and they create the space for others to do it. That's it? It's that simple? Well, I think those are the two that really matter. Lots of books are written with catchy titles and, the 37 exact steps to be a leader in the world. And I really, I think those books have great intentions, but a lot of times overcomplicate things. And one of the reasons I believe that is that I can basically show you very successful leaders that break some of every rule that's ever been written. And so I submit that everything comes down to knowing what should be done and creating the space for others to do it. Everything else falls under the heading, it's important, but falls under the heading of being a good person and being an effective person. And so those things matter. But I think when it comes to looking at what is leadership, it's really those 2 elements. So are leaders born or made? Well, my answer is yes. I liken it to pro sports. There's a small percentage of, like in pro sports, there's a small percentage of leaders that from age 5, that person and everyone around them knew. It's like, well, that guy's going to pro sports. That woman's going to the Olympics. And it's true to some degree with a small percentage of leaders. They're naturals. And and also just like naturals in sports, there are plenty of naturals who made it to pro sports and then washed out because they didn't have the work ethic to keep it going. And so being a natural is part of it. But there's that set of natural leaders, but there's a whole lot of people that are very good leaders, and they've gotten there through sheer grit and determination. So, one of the things about choosing leaders is that, unlike in sports where you can see bodies in motion and you can scout people for physically what they're accomplishing, elevating people to leadership positions can be harder because, first of all, their words don't always match what's going on in their brains. I promised myself I wouldn't talk about politics. Anyway, I believe that's true too, just for all of us, for any humans, our words don't always match what's going on in our brains. And so unlike in athletes where we can observe their body's emotion, we don't necessarily know everything that's going on with a leader. Now, we can observe work ethic. We can observe to a certain degree mental toughness. And those are big considerations. Unfortunately, sometimes those are the only things that are given consideration, and that's problematic because, again, when put in a leadership position, those other 2 things matter more than ever before. So, what do I mean by knowing what should be done? And one of the ways that so I want to make a contrast between knowing what should be done and knowing what should have been done. And so first, knowing what should be done. Knowing what should be done is future oriented and it's growth oriented. And it's knowing what the right thing to do is. Now, what's the definition of right? Well, right is what fosters growth, fosters healthy organizations. And, part of that is instinctual, part of it's learned, part of it's intuitive. Um, but it's knowing what the right thing to do is. Leadership, knowing what should be done is innovative. It's trying new things. It's improving. Um, Knowing what should be done creates a mood of ambition throughout an organization, making those right decisions. It builds on itself. And, this, like I said, this knowing can come from intuition. It can come from experience. It can come just from observing others. And so it comes from many places. But what's important is that regardless of the source, the leader comes from a place of absolute certainty that what they believe should be done is the prescription for progress in the organization. And it's all a very positive momentum. Now, the contrast that with what should have been done, it's usually said like, well, what you should have done. So it's this judgmental thing that comes only with that 2020 hindsight. And the person who only knows how to declare that what you should have done, that's not a leader. That's a spectator offering an assessment of what already happened. Um, True leaders don't operate through rear view mirrors. And many CEOs and politicians have been elevated to levels of leadership because the decision makers deciding whether or not that person would be put in leadership made the mistake of thinking that because that person could so clearly see what should have been done, or, oh, they should not have done that, they make the mistake of thinking that person knows what should have been done. And it's only once that person's in office or in the corner suite that everyone else knows what that person actually knew, is that they have no idea what to do moving forward. And so it's very important when we're looking at leadership, whether it's ourselves asking, do I really know what should be done? Or those making the decisions to elevate such a person to leadership, do they know what should be done moving forward? So that's element number one. Number two, creating the space for others to do it. So a leader's success lies in both, but creating the space for others to do it is actually what makes you a leader. So going back to what should be done, one of my favorite examples is a contrast. And somebody asked me one time, why do you use such ancient examples? And well, first of all, in my mind, they're not that ancient. But secondly, they're far enough ago that they're kind of like well documented. They're not all that controversial. So two great similarities or contrasts were with between Apple and Microsoft. And so Microsoft, the face of Microsoft was Bill Gates, and the face of Apple was Steve Jobs. Both of those guys, visionary leaders. And both of them had as their co-founders visionaries who didn't want to be leaders. Steve Wozniak at Apple and Paul Allen at Microsoft. So both of those guys actually left those companies fairly early on. They were visionary, but they didn't want to be leaders. And so that part two of creating space for others to do the work is where true greatness and true organizations come from. So in creating this space, I'm talking about matching the right people to the right task, allocating the time that's needed to accomplish tasks, making sure the right tools are available, making sure each player plays his position. That's corporate politics, and there are managers that aren't good at it. Leaders are good at it. Leaders keep the players in their positions. Um, and that's part of also fostering a cooperative environment where things that should be handed off are handed off, and there's like this commitment that we always have the best person for the job doing the job. And then one of the another temptation, and this is another thing that kind of filters out who's really a leader versus who's not, is that there is a set of people who get promoted to leadership positions based on their mastery of their current job. And what is not realized is that that person is actually more interested in the hands-on work than in creating the space for others to do it. And I liken it to the difference between the person who wants to be the conductor of the orchestra versus the one who wants to be like first violin. So there's that ambition to be a virtuoso instead of conductor. And that is another area where um, all of a sudden it turns out, oh, that person's not quite as committed to creating the space for others. So, that's the important thing. And so create the space for the right people to do the job. It makes a difference between sleepless nights and falling apart organizations and and thriving organizations and leaders waking up in a sunny disposition every day. Being a little silly there, but it's the game changer. It's the distinction between being a visionary, being a worker, and being a leader. So I'm trying to keep this simple. If you've been watching my other videos, you'll see that I always try to only make like one or two points. I'm a big proponent of boiling things down. So over the next 4 videos, I'm going to teach you the distinctions between knowing what should be done and creating space for others looks like for what I consider to be the 4 leadership senses, 4 distinct um, um, innate aptitudes for leadership. And the way that I term those leadership styles is stabilizer, tactician, inspirational, and visionary. So make sure to tune in for the next 4 videos as I break each one of those down. And until next time, cheers.